standing at the border of what we used to know. 5 points in the darkness make a different kind of show. They say we're better together, but what do they know when the stars align differently down here below? And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Remember all the stories that your granddad told about a republic that wouldn't be controlled. Now the suits in the city say we've all been sold, but there's a fire burning that just won't get old. And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. They draw their lines on paper, we draw ours in the sand. Some dreams are getting closer, while some don't understand. Don't understand. The highways stretch forever toward a setting sun, where cattle graze on memories of battles won. They say unity's the answer, but maybe we're done with playing by the rules of the chosen ones. Oh, maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. And maybe we'll rise when we cut all the ties. There's a flag that we fly under our own sky. Our own sky.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is it's that time again. See, I was here last week, and I told you I'd be here this week, Lord willing, and I am here and feeling better than I did last week. So, you know, I would say that would be the proper trajectory. Wow. Okay, so look, unlike last week, I remembered my coffee as well. So that means we can, this week, have a proper late night coffee talk. So without further ado, let us get started. Welcome to Late Night Coffee Talk. I'm Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist movement, and this is that time where generally once a week I take a break from what I'm working on, independence, and I come in here and I fire up the camera and this whole setup, and I take your questions, right? This is week in, week out. I subject myself to whatever questions you want, whether it be about Texas, about the T&M, politics in general. I take even personal questions sometimes if they're not too intrusive. But I'm here. I make myself available. And much like I told Tommy on his podcast, the Year Zero podcast that I did this week, you don't see Greg Abbott or Dan Patrick or any of those guys doing this very thing, which is opening themselves up to questions. What's on your mind, right? So here I am. I'm accessible, and that's a good thing. I think for us to be able to build that relationship together. So I want to thank you for joining tonight, whether it's your first time or your 1,000th time. Really do appreciate you being here. That being said, you may be asking yourself, how can I ask a question? This is like a computer. It's virtual. How do I ask a question? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's quite simple. If you are watching tonight on the Texian app, you're watching there, you're going to see the chat, right? It's over there. Plus, you're going to see a Q&A section. Drop your questions in there. If you're watching on any of those other platforms, the ones that like to suppress and censor and do all those kinds of things, but we're still there miraculously. All you got to do is just drop your question in the chat. Kara's over there. She's monitoring the aggregate, and if she can spot the question, she'll throw it in the queue for me. But while you're there on those others, be sure to like and subscribe and hit notification bells and share and do all those wonderful things that you got to do over there to help us defeat the algorithm, or just say, you know what, hang it all, because I'm just going to go over here to the Texian app, right? Texian.app, or go search for it in the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and then not have to worry about getting Texas Independence or pro-independence messages censored at all. You can just watch over there and interact with people over there, talk about Texas independence to your heart's content, and then voila, no big tech media censorship. So here we are this week. Oh yeah, one other way to ask your question, which is weird because almost no one availed themselves of it this week, which is kind of weird. But you can also drop your questions via email to coffeetalk@thetnm.org. That's coffee talk, all one word, at thetnm.org. And if that wasn't clear, just kind of watch down here at the bottom and you will see that email address pop up here momentarily, and it'll be there throughout. So maybe we're talking about something and you have a question about what we're talking about. You can go right there and drop it, and that's for people that may be a little shy, don't want to drop their question in the chat. It's perfectly fine. All right. Let's see what we got to do here tonight. I have got a couple of things. And look, I'm just going to be straight with you guys. I make myself available for questions, but that doesn't mean that you have to ask any, right? If you want to just banter with folks, you can do that. But understand, I'm here for questions. So if we don't get a lot of questions, I'm here pretty much until the questions run out. So we run out short, then I don't have to be here for the whole hour and I can get back to work. Okay. So bear that in mind. All right. So let's go over here and take a look and see what we got going on over here. I will. Yeah. Okay. I asked this last week. This is coming from Terry over on the Texian app, and I did answer this last week, which is when is your next in-person appearance? It's in the works, but I cannot speak to when that is going to be. If you want to see me in the flesh and blood, I know it's in the works, but nothing is firmed up enough for me to release yet. So, as you can imagine, there is probably going to be a lot of discussion from us, being as how this is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And we might have a perspective on that, and there may be some places out there that want to hear it from us. So or hear that perspective from us. Oh, I'm woefully undercaffeinated. So anyway, look, first question right out of the gate. There you go, Terry. And look, I remember that question, and I think you asked it last week as well. I think, in fact, you asked three questions, and I do believe that I answered all three on Coffee Talk last week. So there you go. And I gotta say, it's nice to see a lot of new names and a lot of new faces in here. Oh, mercy. All right. Well, I'm going to do one quick scour, and then I'm going to talk about a couple things that I want to talk about, and then we will wrap it up because I got stuff to do, folks. All right. So, really interesting thing, and I'm going to go ahead and get this ready because I want to share the screen with you. Something kind of interesting happened. There was a conversation I had with a colleague earlier today. Excuse me. And we were talking about oddly just sharing tidbits of news, right? As we do. And one of the ones that he pointed me to, he kept bringing up the downgrade of the federal government's credit rating. And I was, I have to say, I'd heard some about this, but as far as kind of how big of a deal it was, I really hadn't. So as soon as I got off the call, I went and pulled it up. And if and I'm just shocked that it went so far under the radar, because I went back and looked at some archives and dug in our kind of news alert system here in the TNM, and I was shocked when I found minimal to light coverage on it. But so look, this may be a surprise to no one else, but it was really a surprise to me, and it's basically news that's a year old, right? And if you didn't know what this is about, Moody's had stripped the U.S., the federal government, of its AAA credit rating back a year ago, and it's pretty wild, right? So essentially, at this point, all three major credit rating agencies have pushed the federal government out of the top tier. And you get to October, and there's a European agency called Scope, and they cut the U.S. from AA to AA minus. And here's what they cited, and I think this was the thing that really caught my attention. Right, let me just zoom this so you guys can see this a lot better. This is the line that I think really caught me. Right, it's they did it citing sustained deterioration in public finances and a weakening of governance standards. Okay. And so in April of 2026, Fitch, which they were up here, they're one of the agencies that dropped the U.S. credit rating, warned that federal debt levels, here we go, federal debt levels keep the United States well above other AA category sovereigns, and that years of fiscal malpractice are starting to bind on the rating itself. So, I think for me, this has really and truly been on my mind pretty much all day since I had the conversation with my friend. And it's, I think two things really. Number one is how under the radar it went. It's basically like they told us that they discovered a million-year-old civilization buried under St. Louis, Missouri, and nobody blinked. Right? I mean, just something along those lines. But excuse me, what is so? Number one, I think the fact that this went so under the radar that no one is talking about it was the shocking thing. But the other is that this did not trigger a sense of urgency among some people. Now, let me give you a caveat there. The average Texan doesn't go out there and look at the credit rating of sovereign entities. That they don't do that, right? What they care about is they want to know why gasoline is so high. They want to know why food prices are so high. They want to know why their wages and their income have essentially flattened or stagnated. They want to know, that there's it, and a lot of times they don't even want to know why, right? They just want to know that something is being done to alleviate it. And so this sent me down a road that dealt with, a lot of issues, right? The economic issues, political issues, cultural issues, which should sound familiar to all of you TNMers. And I think I figured out why this was not that much of a blip on anyone's radar. Not that, average Texan, Joe and Mary Texan, don't care about these sorts of things, but why it didn't create a much bigger stir. And I would contend that it indeed created a much bigger stir. If you look at the price of gold and silver, and you watch it climb, it's just been on this steady increase for quite some time. If you look at that, you look at the moves that are being made by sovereign entities, right? Other countries repatriating their gold, other countries looking at essentially dumping the dollar as the world reserve currency, this big, massive upset to the global economic system. People no longer around the world, nor at home, are viewing the United States as a safe bet. As an entity, and I want to be very clear, as an entity, the United States is clearly coming into coming into being, I think, into the perception of people around the world, and especially here domestically, as not a reliable institution. Now, for us, we've said this for a long time. We have been, much like in the story of the Iliad, right? We've been Cassandra. We've been shouting out the prophecy and being doomed to people not believing, right? Not saying this is prophetic, but, look, Stevie Wonder could see this one coming. Unsustainable debt, systemic dysfunction at the federal level, both politically and economically, cultural fragmentation, extreme polarization. All of these things didn't just start in, a year ago or 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 8 years ago. These things have been on a trajectory moving ever closer toward what is really, I think, kind of the date with destiny, right? The date with destiny being when suddenly what everyone thought was the safe bet, the United States federal system, turns out to be absolute snake eyes. It's a bust. And so here we are in Texas. And when we talk about this sense of urgency, people say, well, we have problems here. Absolutely, we have problems here. But understand that we can fix all of the problems that are right here in Texas. And as long as we are shackled and chained to the federal system, then we will suffer whatever fate they suffer. And so I said this last week, and I mentioned it at the Abbeville conference back in March, and at the risk of repeating, I'm going to say it again, and loud and clear for the people in the back of the room so you can hear me. Texas absolutely will become a self-governing independent nation, either by design or by default. We want it to be by design, right? We want to be the arbiters of our own destiny. We want to be able to take our destiny in our own hands and come out strong as the 8th largest economy in the world at the starting gate and be able to do those things. We want to have an orderly, structured exit. But if the people of Texas tarry, if we continue to allow these roadblocks that are the political establishment or not keeping the main thing, then where Texas lands, for our time or our children or their children, is at the tail end of what is probably not going to be a gradual decline, right? Everything moves slow until it doesn't. And that's because there is an acceleration curve often at the end of these things. And so it is a frightening scenario to think about what would happen were the United States economy to collapse, or the federal government collapse and go even far more tyrannical or absolute balkanization. I mean, you think about these worst case scenarios and understand that, people think, well, that's a worst case scenario. It's least likely to happen. But each one of those scenarios I just lined out. I mean, I didn't even include civil war in there. Each one of those things that I just lined out become increasingly more probable every single day that we wait. And so when people tarry and when they come back and say, well, I just don't know if this is what we need to do. Well, what they're saying is they are willing to accept the higher probability of absolute and utter apocalypse and ruin rather than take some time and some effort right now to make that thing happen, to escape that fate. You see, Texas will be independent, but like I said, by design or by default. And that choice is really up to each and every one of us, right? By design. It's our choice where we put our time and our efforts and our energies and our money and everything else that we do. Those are choices that we make, and it's a daily choice. I go back to Ernst Renan, who was he was the French philosopher who mused on what is a nation when, nation states are relatively new things, historically speaking. And for a few centuries now, philosophers have been trying to come, and political scientists and people in the legal profession have tried to come to terms with defining what a nation is. And Renan is renowned, see what I did there, in that space because, a couple of centuries ago, he writes this entire treatise on what is a nation. I'm not going to try to say it in the French. And one of the things that he says is that a nation is a daily plebiscite. Those of you who don't know what that is basically a referendum. It's being a nation is a daily referendum. This is Renan speaking, right? And from that perspective, I would posit that so is building a nation or gaining the independence of a nation. It's a daily plebiscite. You vote every single day, and not just every day, throughout the day, through your actions or, in fact, your inactions. People say all the time that, with voter turnout as abysmal as it is, if apathy were on the ballot and everybody that didn't bother to cast a vote, that's what they voted for, then apathy would be the clear winner every single solitary election. That's not wrong, right? It's not wrong, but you can still make an impact even if you don't want to deal with that system, right? You can still make an impact, and you make that impact by every day, every moment of every day, making a conscious decision to help advance the independence of your nation. So, maybe I'll write a paper that's a corollary or an addition to Renan's work, but that's what I believe. It's what I firmly believe. I see somebody over there saying that Abbott doesn't need Texas donations; he gets enough dirty money. He's got a massive war chest, right? But that being said, let me just get back to this original part of what I was saying. Right? What triggered it was that thought process related to the downgrading of the credit and the realization that it didn't really make a blip on the radar because there's so many other things. It's wild to watch a people all frankly realize that the system is on its last legs, and people are either, kind of classifying into three groups, right? They're either trying to get all they can from it, squeeze it out before it dies, right? Or they're trying their dead level best to resurrect this corpse. We've seen people do that very thing. Or there are people like us that are looking to essentially escape it and say, look, we don't have to go down with it. It's not a suicide pact. I kind of like where we are. And I got to tell you, I got a piece of news that I heard last night that I can't share, but I got a piece of news from this last primary that was probably one of the most encouraging things that I've heard in quite some time. Confirmation of what we have said time and time again, which is if this goes in front of a vote of the people, it's going to win, and it's not going to win by a little; it's going to win by a lot. It's just, it's killing me that I can't share the story with you. So, all right, let's get over here and see what we got. See if any of you folks have taken me up. Nope. Oh, so let's go over here and we will take a look in the question. I love it. Terry's over there quoting Renan. Yeah, it's a really interesting. If you read What Is a Nation, it's a really interesting read. And I've talked about it before for many years. It gets down to this. It's gonna sound like a broken record. Many of you have heard this before, and I've actually had to say something to people here recently. But the fact that people they really don't conceptualize the difference between nation, state, and country, those three words, and they use them so interchangeably, when really and truly those three things are very distinct concepts. The fact that the waters are so muddy around those, and people do use them interchangeably. People say, "I would die for my country." I mean, I can't even think of the various things people say right now. Or they, anyway. Let's just. I'm not going to go into that whole thing, but I'm still at the stage that I have been for many years. Is that if people really understood the difference between the terms nation, state, and country, they would understand the situation that we're in far better than they actually do. It's the lack of distinction, or the confusion of those terms, that leads people to think that states are just sort of administrative subdivisions of the federal system, or they twist around the idea of America as a nation, and the United States of America and the nation are the same thing, and the country's the same thing. They don't know. And so if you were to pin somebody down and just ask them, hey, when you say the word nation, what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Or when you say country, what do you mean by that? Same thing with state. They see the name state of Texas, or state of Louisiana, or state of California. They see that word state and they go, well, we can't be our own country because we're states. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Go back to read the Declaration of Independence, the one of the colonies from Great Britain, and you will see that each of the colonies became independent states on par with, at the same level as peers of, and it's referred to in the Declaration as the state of Great Britain, right? And so that ought to be your first sign that what people conceive of in this term state is not what it is. When you have the Montevideo Convention from whatever it was, the 1930s, where the world got together and signed this convention and basically signed off to help define what a state was, because they needed a consistent definition. It literally has a definition under international law, what a state is. And so by virtue of the fact that Texas carries the name and meets the criteria, we're a state and can be considered as such, right? Got a whole podcast episode I did about that. But anyway, I digress. I roam a little too much because that whole conversation that I had today about the downgrading of the credit rates, this is what happens with my head. I get that, and all of a sudden I'm figuring out what the impact is. What does this mean for Texas independence? Okay, let's see what we got here. Got a couple of questions there and there. Oh, Terry, you're so close. We could have a vigorous conversation about that. All right. Here's a question. Laughs often says, Mr. Miller, how do you see the runoff election of Cornyn versus Paxton going? I've read Paxton has pulled ahead, but what are actual Texans saying? It's interesting. It's really a good question. So uh, let me tell you this, um, and just be think about the best way to put this. We came out in 2016 after the Brexit vote and declared loudly that political polling is broken. Now, it's not that we didn't talk about political polling before then, right? There was a daily cost poll that we railed on. There was a Reuters Ipsos poll that we railed on because methodology, right? But 2016 was absolute proof positive, right? The Brexit polling was completely wrong, versus what the outcome was. That's a whole other conversation. And obviously, if it had been polling, you'd have had President Hillary Clinton in 2016 as well. So it's been broken for quite some time, and I don't know that they can figure out a way to fix it. I don't know. It's just kind of maybe get you in the ballpark, but not really. I think they need to change their margin of error calculations and go to larger sample sizes, things of that nature. But I digress, right? So that takes me to your question. And I wanted to be just absolutely clear with you, and I needed to establish context, is that the polling that is coming out for all these races, right? Whether it's the Cornyn Paxton race, whether it's Chip Roy or Mays Middleton, we've even got some preliminary polling. I think there was an article on the Texan Partisan about the hobby poll that came out of U of H back, I guess, a couple months ago. Maybe it was March, that showed universal name recognition Republican Governor Greg Abbott only up by like 5 or 6 points ahead of Gina, generic Democrat Hinojosa, right, who has almost no name ID. I mean, very little, right? Not as a statewide figure. Excuse me. I need to wet the whistle. So I would say this: don't put a lot of trust in those polls, especially when you're riding a pretty close race. The primaries were definitely proof positive, right? Because I don't know any of the polling that came even close. And you got to remember, I, in my personal business, have campaign clients and am in touch with people either as a contractor or subcontractor with other campaigns. And, universally, the polling, whether it's the shotgun polls that are done by campaigns or some of these third party polls that are allegedly done by decent institutions, that they're just flat wrong. I mean, they don't give you an accurate idea. And I think it's probably because less and less of the pools that they pull from for polling really are representative of the electorate as a whole. Again, a whole other conversation, right? So, you've got competing polls that are dropping, some showing Paxton ahead, some showing Cornyn ahead, some showing that they're neck and neck. Remember, going into the primaries, all of these polls that were coming out had Paxton kind of just about running away with it, right? If not at 50%, just right below it. And that's not what we saw at all. So don't have any faith in those, right? Those polls they're jacked up. Okay. But how do I see it? How do I see the runoff going? I think it's kind of, even though Cornyn edged out Paxton in the primaries, I think it's Paxton's to lose at this point. which is a pretty amazing situation when you think about it, right? How many millions upon millions of dollars poured in on behalf of John Cornyn? Paxton has raised a fraction of that and still consistently polls right at or ahead of Cornyn. So, time will tell with with Wesley Hunt out of the race. It'll be interesting to see where his voters go. I talked to somebody yesterday, who shall remain nameless, but I hadn't talked to him. Really, I hadn't seen him since we did Freedom Fest in Memphis. He was there as well. And we were talking about this particular race. He's super well connected. And we got to talking about this particular race, and he said, I don't know either. He said, I don't know how it's going to turn out. It depends really on how scared of Tallarico people are. They would prefer Paxton. They're sick of Cornyn, but they're also afraid of losing to Tallarico. So I don't know how that calculus works out for people in their heads. I mean, I just don't. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I would say that his assessment is pretty spot on. That's where people's heads are right now. And so, it's long past time, in my opinion, to put Cornyn out to pasture. He's never been a friend to us in any shape, form, or fashion. But I don't hold out any hope on the federal level at all. You could replace all of them, and what you're going to get in anywhere from 6 to 12 years is kind of a carbon copy of what you had before. So I don't put a lot of faith and trust in the federal system. You send people there, it's kind of like sending them into a meat grinder, right? Anyway, thank you for your question. Oh, and to your last part, what are actual Texans saying? Pretty much what I just said, right? I'm telling you, what I'm hearing, and that's it. Of course, my people I hang around are going to have a very negative view on John Cornyn, right? But not everybody is like us. So I think the remarks from the gentleman I was talking about a moment ago, probably the closest you're going to get to the hot take from the general electorate that are going to vote in that runoff. Okay, here we go. Voting is a right and civil duty. Actually, voting's a privilege, which is kind of interesting. It's an interesting conversation to have. And it's a civil duty. Yeah. But it's getting harder to vote. Who is the least corruptible? Wow. Who is less likely to cooperate and protect criminals? It's getting exhausting. I feel you. I mean, I understand the frustration. We have to understand. We talk about Article 1, Section 2, all political powers inherent in the people. And when you have a representative government like we have, a republic, excuse me, when you have a republic like we have, those people that go to represent are supposed to be, in an ideal scenario, representative of the people that send them. Okay, not, they will tell you these platitudes of, I am there to represent all of my constituents. But the reality is that those representatives are chosen via a democratic manner. And so, therefore, the electorate votes and chooses this person to say, this person represents us the most, right? This is the person that's closest to us. So this is the person that we want to represent us. And then they go and they allegedly are supposed to represent those people, people that, and I say that not to say that this is some sort of deferred mob rule, because that's not it at all, right? Because in a constitutional republic, we have these representatives that are supposed to represent the constituents, but they do so in this framework of the law, with a foundation of natural God-given rights that can't be violated. And so they have this framework that they operate in. You can call it the Constitution, but I think it's even bigger than the Constitution. But they do have this framework, and that's what makes it a republic. It's not a rule by majority. It's not a rule by representatives or an aristocracy. It's a rule of law. We have this social contract that says this is how we're going to get together and govern ourselves, and that's great. But what we've got here is we've got a situation that when humans who are fallible, corruptible, when they're involved in it at any level, as the voter or constituent through the representative or the people that interpret the framework, the laws, whatever level it is, whatever has a potential to be corruptible likely will become corrupted unless you have this framework in place to keep them in bounds. And so there is this, people talk about the three-branch government and its checks and balances. And I would extend that to every other aspect. It's not just a three-branch government with checks and balances. There's checks and balances that happen between the voters and those that they elect, and between the system itself, right? Those people that are sent to represent, and the framework that they have to operate in. And the challenge that we've got here, and it's not just in Texas, when I hear people talk about, well, Texas is just getting as bad as DC, guys, it's all over the place. And it tells me that you fundamentally misunderstand what the battle is. It's not just the big battle between us and the federal government. Look, our relationship with the federal government is just to extract ourselves from that system. And it misses the bigger battle, right? The real battle, which is between the people, us, the Texan people, in an entrenched political establishment that has effectively subverted every aspect of the system that we live under, right? So we have a system where you have voters. You want to talk about corruptible. Corruptible is when voters can vote for people who then go into government and take money from other people to give it back to those people, right? That is corruptible. That's how you get a corruptible electorate, or an electorate that will vote for somebody because that person can grant them special privileges and favors. That's how you get a corruptible electorate. But your electorate, once it becomes corrupted in that way, what do? The people that they elect become gestalts. They become representative of that corruption. And so corrupt people produce corrupt representatives who then in turn have the power, if in sufficient numbers, to corrupt the very system of government. And so this is the reality that you live under. And I'm not telling you this to say that you should you should give up fighting or to make you feel bad. I just want you to understand the system, the way, really the rules of the game, right? Know your opponent, know the battlefield, know all those things. That's the reality of it. And so we have to, the way that we have to go about the work that we do is we have to continue to fight for every single inch of ground. And I know you're going to say, well, wait a minute, you're just saying vote harder. No, I'm not saying vote harder. I'm saying play smarter. I'm saying you have to hold the position, because imagine right now, if every one of us said, you know what, this system sucks so bad, we're not going to play. We're going to step out and we're not going to cast another vote in this system as long as it's rigged. Well, what have you done? You have effectively ceded all the power, right? You've basically said, I'm cool now with all the votes coming out 99 and 98% in favor of the corrupted, right? So you have to still be there to hold your ground and stand your ground, but you have to be willing to put in the energy that is not just voting to go out there and gain the ground. When is the last time you had this conversation? And not just the conversation, but when's the last time you had this conversation with your spouse or your friends or your family or your neighbors? When is the last time you organized and block walked or phone banked or done any of those things necessary? Because Here's the other secret ingredient, and it's not it's not the corrupted. So, we have the uncorrupted versus the corrupted, or the people versus the political establishment. But I actually gave you the answer to this a moment ago. And it's that so many people sit it out, right? I mean, go to your municipal elections, right? I should have pulled that up. If I'd have known we were going to talk about this tonight, I'd have pulled that up. But look at what the voter turnout was for your most recent municipal election. That was held just last weekend, last Saturday. Go see what the voter turnout was for it. I literally saw a race over here where 500 people cast votes. There was one that people were making fun of where there were like 3 people that cast a vote, right? I mean, for some, like it was a municipal utility district or a water district or something, right? But I mean, the turnout was abysmal. Understand, there are a lot of people out there that are absolutely disaffected and disgruntled and have checked out of the system. But it's those people that are ultimately going to be the ones that help us win Texas independence, because it will be the first time that they will have been able to cast a vote for something that will concretely improve their lives. It's really the first say that they've ever had in governance their entire voting lives. And I think that honestly goes for the rest of us too. When have we ever been asked a fundamental question of governance? The answer is never. We've just been asked to choose the next captain and crew of the Titanic every single solitary time. So, Annie, here's the bottom line. It's those people that are disaffected, disengaged, disenfranchised, if you want to call it, that have given up hope. That's your source. That's the people you can go to get out of this frustration, because ultimately, to maintain any legitimacy, we've got to win those people. But here's the other X factor. Most of the corrupted system, the political establishment, is held in place not by people that have been corrupted, but by people that are low information voters. They don't know how the system works. They don't know the reality. They don't know the facts. There are people that get voted for because their dad was a hard worker. And I know that sounds very specific, because it's true. And it literally just happened, right? But the hardworking daddy, was not running for office, right? But that kind of low information kind of stuff. And you have to begin to look at it as, when people hold those sorts of attitudes, the damage that they do to you and your family and your neighbors and your community. I mean, we've got to have such a disgust and disdain. We do have to have compassion. We do have to have a certain degree of grace that we can give some of these people that are just oblivious. And we have to offer to get them right, to give them the information and knowledge that they need. But if they refuse it, then we have to treat them what they are, which is really and truly part of the problem. Those are the ones, if you did not like the results of this most recent primary, understand that about 70% of it was driven by low information voters. It's the reality. People that just were not possessed of the facts, were not operating from a position that was well informed or rational or reasonable by any stretch of the imagination. And so therefore, because they had the power, it's like giving a toddler a gun, right? They didn't have the experience or the knowledge or the information, but they had the power. And so they pointed that gun at you and they shot it. So understand that that's kind of the way that the way that their vote was utilized. So things that come down the pike that are not great, because somebody that was a low information voter voted to put this system in place, understand they bear responsibility for it equally to the politician they put in office. That is not going to be a popular statement tonight. And frankly, I don't care. But anyway, Annie, great question. Okay, let's check over here one more time. Huh, I don't know. David asks, why doesn't the Texas scorecard give the oh, this is via email. Why doesn't the Texas scorecard give the TNM the time of day? Seems like Texas independence and the majority of Texans supporting it would be news worth talking about. That's, I don't know. They have previously. They basically said if we have news, anything to release, we're more than welcome to send it over. I sent Brandon a text message the other day congratulating him, or I guess it was a few weeks ago, and congratulations on the birth of his child. And yeah, I mean, it's not there. They just don't. I don't think they actively seek to cover what we're doing, but I think at any time. But here, let's put it to the test. I'll reach out to them next week and see what we can find out. That could be fun. Thanks for your question, David. All right, one last check. Yeah, Will, I need a throat lozenge. It's true, man. My throat. I'll confess something to you. When I got sick this last time, on top of it, I got a like a strep. I got strep throat. So it was like two things at once. And my voice, like last week, my first week back on Coffee Talk, back in the saddle, we went an hour, and I mean, by the time it was over with, it was like I had gargled fiberglass. I mean, it was a hot mess, and you can hear it now, right? Because I've been talking steadily for an hour or for 48 minutes. So, it's there. I'll be hitting the chloroseptic later, I guarantee, as soon as I get off of here. All right. I think we're good, folks. Mike Werlow says, are you suggesting voting should be a privilege instead of a right? No, actually, what I'm saying is that voting is actually already a privilege, right? The fact that they can strip you of it. Not everyone can vote, right? So if it's a right, let's get down to a right. So take freedom of speech, right? So freedom of speech is a right. We call right to keep and bear arms, right? Freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, fundamental rights. But notice nowhere is it enumerated, not to say that all rights are enumerated, but notice it doesn't say anywhere that there is this fundamental right. And what you're talking about is suffrage. And so, it's kind of interesting. And it's, if you think about that, understand that over time, the franchise, the right to vote, and I'm putting it in quotes because it's the terminology they use, had to be extended. Well, wait a minute. If it's to various groups and people and things of that nature, but it can still be removed from someone, right? The ability to vote can be removed from someone. And so therefore, you end up in a situation that can you call it a right if it can be taken away, right? Because then otherwise, if you say that it's a fundamental right, it's a right, then you could argue that it could be that it cannot be taken away from anyone for any reason whatsoever. So it's a really interesting question. I can tell you that the founders and the framers never viewed voting as a right. It was always suffrage, and even up until recent times, like I can't remember when they did this, but there were certain types of elections here in Texas, and I want to say it was property tax elections, right? It was something related to property taxes, I believe, where the only people that could vote were people that own property, right? Because you're the only people who have a say in it. So, you can't say. I don't think you can make a case that voting is a right, at least not one based in history and the system of government that we live in, nor do I think you could say that voting is a right, I guess, to really extend the franchise to everyone. Otherwise there wouldn't be people trying to go out here and say that, well, we need to give illegal aliens the right to vote in their municipal elections because municipal elections still affect these people, and therefore they should be able to vote, right? That's when you say that voting is an absolute right, then that's the kind of thing that you run into. So anyway, great question, Mike, and I'm happy to clarify. All right. Oh my word, what is happening here? Sean, thank you so much for the $50 super chat on YouTube. Really, really do appreciate it. And thank you for being here tonight. I really, really do appreciate it. TNM definitely appreciates it. We got a lot of work to do, folks, and $50 goes a long way. So thank you so much, Sean. All right, friends, that is going to be a wrap for tonight. Yeah. So if you watched Late Night Coffee Talk on the Texian app, then this does not apply to you. But if you were watching on YouTube or Facebook or X, then or Rumble, head over to Texian.app. That's Texian.app, or go to the Google Play Store or to the Apple App Store. Download the app. Just search for Texian. You'll find it. But this is the place where Texas independent supporters organize, act, connect. I could do an entire show, if you want to call that, on the Texian app and everything that it does. But rest assured that this is where the organizing happens. And the fact that we have our own live stream platform over there now, and you can connect with other Texas independent supporters and help us with campaigns and get the full calendar and all those cool things. Just make sure you go do it. Go to Texian.app, sign up, download the app. You will not be sorry, and it helps us bypass big tech censorship. Texian Store, if you want to get your merch, including that cool coffee mug that's up there now that I've been hanging on to one through the entire episode. Lots of Texit merch, TNM merch, all kind of cool stuff. Head over to TexianStore.com. Proceeds go to benefit the work of the TNM, but we've got some news coming about the Texian Store, and I do believe it will start probably next Monday. So just be prepared for that, because it's super cool, and I think you're going to appreciate it. So head over to Texian Store, browse now, get signed up over there so you can get notifications and all that cool stuff. And you heard me mention it earlier as well, Texian Partisan, the official news outlet of the TNM, the only news source for pro-Texan news, pro-independence news. I mean, it's done through a Texas first perspective. All Texians get their news from the Texian Partisan. Head over to TexianPartisan.com right now. And if you're joining us and we're bashful about asking a very basic question about Texit, then easy peasy, lemon squeezy, head to texitnow.org and look, it's the largest questions and answers related to Texas independence that exists. So if you've got questions like what happens to Social Security, military bases, all these things, all the questions that people have about Texit, head over to texitnow.org and get your questions answered. All right, friends, that is going to be a wrap. Thank you all so very much for participating tonight and being here, asking thought-provoking questions, and having excessive amounts of banter in the chat. I love it when you guys talk. Honestly, I would just come in here and just fire this thing up if I thought, if literally the only thing that happened was you guys got together in a chat and met one another and talked with one another and experienced life together as Texians. I would just do it. I'd come here, turn the thing on for an hour a day and let you guys go do that. But you don't need me to fire up a live stream for that. You can go over to the Texian app and do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So make it happen. But that being said, it is time for me to get back to work. I'm going to leave you with the words that I leave you with every time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.